if there is an art in war, then Hitler failed as an artist. You can connect Archduke Franz Ferdinand to hentai. Who would win in a fight? 300 war elephants or the Alps? You could have buried it, cremated it, thrown it away, or done anything else, but you literally decided to eat your eyeball. My hometown had the first McDonald's drive-thru. Now that's history. History is filled with stories of great nations and powerful leaders. Everyone knows Alexander the Great, that led Macedonia to create the largest ancient empire in the world. Julius Caesar threw hands from Britain to Rome. And even old Georgie Washington took his wooden teeth and bit Britain on the back of the arm. You know that area that's like really sensitive? So like the bite like hurts, but it also like lasts a while and just kind of stings for like 10 minutes. But there are stories that don't get enough appreciation. They get lost to the common man. Sweden, the land that's arguably best known for meatballs and adult furniture Legos, had its 15 minutes to shine when it was under the rule of Carolus Rex, the lion from the north. A child king that looked into the face of other powerful nations and said, slika minin bolondris. It's a suck my balls pigs. I put in Google Translate. Talk about such an imposing man. I have the other half of the Chilling Fields podcast, Johnny O, as my guest today. Johnny O and his co-host, a previous Not Your Daddy's Histories guest, Jeff King, they have a podcast that you can find on any of the streaming services, Spotify, Google, iTunes. So please go give them a listen and a subscription. Subscribe to them. Please enjoy our conversation about Sweden's greatest child ruler, and remember, this is not your daddy's history.
That fort's cool and all, but the whole stuff, I got a problem with our national anthem being written by a guy who got caught, watching everyone else go to war while he's on a prison boat.
Oh, man, that sucks. Oh, that really sucks. I'll write a song about this.
Bombs really bursting in there, huh? Glad I'm in here.
Come on, guys, keep the flag up. Come on, it's not that hard.
Come on, there. Oh, it's still up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I wrote this song while I was watching you guys go to war.
Oh, man. Johnny O. Let's do some catch up because you have been very busy fucking recently. Let's see. So you were in the Magoobies competition, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. A lot of fun. Made it to the finals. Got second place, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
If you're okay with losing. But
well, and for any people that don't know, because obviously this is a history podcast, but myself as well as a lot of the guests I've had on, all of them, we all do stand-up comedy in the Baltimore, D.C. area. And Johnny O went to a competition at Magoobies Joke House in Timonium, and he won second place. And that's impressive. I've done the competition. I've gotten second place one time. So I know how hard it is to get to that point, right? To just get to second place, it's difficult. And to win it is even more so. So good on you. Good on you, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah. Fun part was I was the last man in, too, in the semifinals.
Nice.
Like, time to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I was and the difficult thing about the Magoobies show is the fact that it's what's called in the game. This is a little comedy lingo for you guys, a little inside look. It's called the Bringer Show, which is horseshit. Mm-hmm. It's the worst thing to ever be made on the fucking planet, because basically they'll tell you that you have to bring people to do a show, and comedy is like any other kind of art form where if you do it and you do it well, everyone around you still doesn't give a shit. Like they don't care. So bringing people to shows, it's like pulling teeth with no tools. You just have
Mm-hmm.
to, like, it's slippery and terrible. And so when you go to a place and they say, "Hey, you need to bring like 7 people to perform," you're like, "Shit, I don't even know 3 people that care enough to hear a joke that I tell,
Yeah.
let alone
Just got some homeless
go to a
guys,
show."
give them double cheeseburgers, tell them to have a
Exactly.
seat.
Yeah. You basically have to bribe people, be like, "Listen, I'll pay for one of your drinks and your ticket if you
Yeah.
please just show up." And you end up spending way more money than you would even win winning
Mm-hmm.
the show.
Yep. Oh, it's horrible. Horrible life. The life
but
we choose.
but you won it, so that, or not won it. I'm sorry, you got second place, which is good. Who'd you lose to? Who was the first place winner?
Justo. Really
That's
funny guy.
right, it was Justo. Yeah.
One of my best friends too in comedy. So me and him have been kind of battling it out all year, or working it out, battling it
Mm-hmm.
out all year. So it was kind of fun. At least I'm gonna lose. I'm glad it was to him because
Oh yeah.
he's a
Yeah,
buddy.
that's at least a good thing, is when you lose to somebody you know. I lost to a guy when I got second place there. I lost to a guy I'd never heard of before. And just as like the thing with bringer shows and why they suck is because if you bring more people, you just have a better chance of winning, because then they decide to win by the audience. So even though I had a really, really good set and I had a really good night that night and I killed it, all of a sudden, I'm up there with this guy, and they call my name, and my pocket of friends and a couple people that are still there, because people start leaving at this point, they clap for me. And then the next guy goes up and he has like 20 people and they all go off and they're all way louder. And
Yep.
I was like, dude, you won just because you have more people that care about you. That's not fair.
It's pretty funny how much actually being funny really doesn't matter in a comedy contest. They're the
Right.
fucking worst. I hate them.
No, I mean, and it's just like with anything in like an entertainment business, it's all a matter of how much money can you make.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like, it's because that's what they look at. They go like, we'll give you more time, we'll give you a better look if you can bring 20 people and they can collectively spend $1,000 more than the next guy. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying it's a big conspiracy. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but that's just how the
That's
shows
just
are.
it's business. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even conspiracy. It is what it is, man.
So
It's
let's get
Rex.
into the real meat of this show. Today we will be talking about the Swedish king, Carolus Rex, or Carl the 12th, or Carl Gustav. I don't know. He's got like 15,000 names.
Yes.
This is going back onto the themes of talking about historical subjects that are from the band Sabaton that I'm a big fan of. Yeah, this guy is one of my favorite subjects, because studying him made me realize a certain period of history was way more fascinating than I originally thought it was.
Yeah.
Like the end of the, like, I never was a big fan of medieval history, but I took a college class on that, and that kind of brought me into that. But then the period between that and like the birth of America, like 1776, I just was like, well, that's just a bunch of nothing then.
Yeah.
Nothing happened before that. And then studying this guy, I was like, oh no, you know what? Just everything in history is interesting. You just got to find it.
Yeah, man. He's something else. I really enjoyed digging into this. Like, again, like I was a history major in college, but this is one of those the Eastern Europe, the Nordic countries, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, you really really have to be passionate about it, or because it's not really general studies. It's
Mm-hmm.
and at a certain level in college, even you're taking whatever class the professors are offering,
Yeah.
whatever they want to teach, and it's unless you have a connection to him, man. But this guy was a real badass, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Real
Yeah.
badass. Really
And
cool.
it's because talking about about like being general studies, or like you said, like wanting to be like impassioned to study something, that's what you have to do anything in those states. Because if you think about it now, if you ask anybody if they know anything about Finland or Norway, Denmark, any of those things, they don't know any. They probably couldn't even tell which one was a part.
Yeah.
Right, like they
Yep.
all just call all of them the same name. Yeah,
Scandinavia, right?
Finland. They're all Finland.
Yeah.
So it is really fascinating. I keep saying that on this podcast. I'm trying to like punch myself in the eye every time I say it's so interesting, because
It
it's
really
like
is, though.
it's my tick word.
I love it.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun to go back and find out like these countries that now aren't necessarily on the map or like
Mhm.
anything that you would normally study, to go back in time and find out, oh, well, they had the ability to, or they did have an interesting history.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they're just not on the map because they're still exhausted from all the ass whoopings they gave and took.
yeah.
Fucking 1700s, dude. Oh my god.
So to talk about Karl XII, I think it's important to go back and talk about basically the rise of the Swedish Empire, which you have to go back and talk about Gustavus Adolphus, whose nickname was one of the coolest nicknames for like a military leader, the Lion from the North.
Mm.
I'm like, dude, that's straight up like Game of Thrones shit.
Oh yeah.
Like that's so cool, the Lion from the North.
Oh, it's so cool.
I'm like, what a fucking awesome name.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
like,
man. It's interesting too. Like, yeah, it kind of goes back to, like, Richard the Lionheart,
mhm,
like that westernization they're all trying to get, and they all
yeah.
kind of took badass names from each other too.
That's definitely something I think we're missing from like modern, you know. It's like no, like you you never really hear any cool nicknames for anybody, that you hear today, like Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's like the coolest one.
Yeah.
But he's not the Mad Dog of Wisconsin or
Yeah.
wherever he's
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
It's like let's give him something cooler, man.
Yeah.
Mad Dog is nice, but let's take that 7 and crank it to 11,
Hmm.
like Lion from the North.
Yeah, he's the only one, man. He's the only one. A lot of them are all nerds. It's all like, you see generals on TV are like,
Hmm.
nerd. Like, where where's the Carolus Rexes? Where's the Pattons, man? Like,
Oh, dude, I'm gonna have an episode on Patton because I fucking love that guy.
dude, yeah. And I know we're getting into it, but I want to make this clear. The more I read this, the more I was like, this guy is General Patton. And General Patton was wrong when he said he thought he lived past lives. He
Hmm.
thought he was with Napoleon. Like, no, no, he was Carolus Rex
Yeah,
beforehand. Like, nah,
yeah. He was not French. He was definitely Swedish for
yeah,
sure. Yeah,
love it.
when Gustavus was basically Swedish came to power in that area in the 30 Years' War, which is once again one of those things that I had heard before, but when you're in school, for the most part, maybe it's mentioned. Maybe just kind of brought up by a teacher if they care enough to mention it,
Hmm.
but you don't know shit. I've never studied anything about the 30 Years' War. And then when I looked into it, I was like, damn, this is one of those wars that really had a pretty profound effect on a lot of things and is way more important and very graphic. I actually remember the first day of doing research for this, I looked up 30 Years' War. As I always do, I start at Wikipedia and then I reach out and go to other places.
Yeah.
Immediately on the Wikipedia page, for the picture of 30 Years' War, they have like an old woodcut drawing of a bunch of guys just hanging from a tree,
Jesus. Yeah.
like a giant tree with like 15 people hanging from it. And it's
Hmm.
just like, this is the shit that happened during that time. And you're like, well, that's rough. So I click on the picture and I find out that it's from a collection of other pictures that are just things that this guy drew that happened during the 30 Years' War. And it's all just mass murder.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like people getting set on fire, people getting shot, stabbed,
Hmm.
torn apart, like all
It's
this kind of shit. And I was like, whoa, holy
I,
fuck.
I think, like, it's crazy. I think over 8 million, 10 million people died. It
Yeah.
was another one of these holy war conflicts
Yeah. Well,
where
and
people will do anything. Like, that's
yeah.
when you put God. You think you're doing stuff for God? No one's
Yeah.
stopping.
That's the thing. When people talk about, and this is something we can talk about because it's something that I've always been very fascinated with having this talk with people. When people talk about God being the reason for people being killed and murdered and stuff, this is what they're talking about.
Hmm.
Like obviously you have other examples. You can talk about the Crusades and this and that, but the 30 Years' War really was just people of different religious, sects and different religious groups just going to war with the worst that they could. And
Yeah, yep.
and I think that was a point that somebody made that really hit home with me was that this was a war that went on for 30 years. Now, it would be different factions. It was one of those things where people would come in and out. So these people would join and then they'd leave and another people would join. And then the other people would come back and join and then leave again. But at the same, like this was 30 years. Back then, that was half of a person's life if they were lucky. right?
Yeah.
Like that, like
Crazy.
people lived to
Yeah.
be like 40.
Yep.
So was a war that literally took out the entirety of some people's lives, and it's like, I like imagine, even some of the worst wars like World War I and World War II, those lasted like 8 years, something like that. But yeah, just the fact that the 30 Years War was really truly that long of a conflict, and about how much of effect that would have on the populace during that time is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's like, 'cause that's when you got like, it's coming off. It's kind of like the end of the Roman Empire, Holy
Hmm.
Roman Empire for good, and you got the German people coming big with like Lutheranism, Methodists, and
Hmm.
now everybody's trying to. It's all about money too. I mean, we're not paying taxes. We're not even Catholic. We're not paying you anymore.
Hmm.
It's just nuts. And then once you get religion involved, yeah, man, there's no stopping.
And what we can talk about for a little bit was I've always gotten to like slight arguments, not too much, just because people don't care enough to have this full on argument. But whenever people talk about how, like, oh, how many people have died because of God, that they'll always use history and go back and be like, look at the Crusades and look at this and how many holy wars have been fought and blah 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 blah. And the thing is that the point that they're trying to make is that religion has had negative effects on people because people have fought over religion,
Hmm.
and so they're like, that's a critique on that. But my issue is that if you look at pretty almost every war that has ever been fought over quote religion, there's always some other like thing below it
Oh
that
yeah.
is like what it was actually fought over. You know,
Hmm.
it's like, oh, the Crusades were fought because Christians wanted to kill Muslims. It'd be like, no, the Muslims were beating the shit out of Christians for a long time. They were kicking their ass and about to go into Europe and kick even more ass and take over the world for all they knew. And
Hmm.
they just kind of used God as like a scapegoat, basically, for like the dumb people that they couldn't justify it for.
It's how they rally the people of their country to get behind them too. Like,
Exactly. So it's like, yes, I can agree. Like I can agree with saying something like religion is used to motivate war, but I don't like it when people say how many people have died because of it. Like, well, no, they've died because of a lot of reasons. You
they
know,
died because men are imperfect, and that's what we do. We kill each other.
exactly. Now, the 30 Years War, though, I think is interesting because this is one of those that when I kept finding onto it, were there other reasons people wanted to fight? Of course, because people want land and stuff like that. But a lot of the conflicts really just came around to just, look at that other kind of Christian. I don't like him.
Hmm.
Like that's really what it was. So that's why I said like this is the example that people should use when they say that wars are fought over religion. I'm like, this is it. This is the one big one.
Yeah, they're a huge one.
To go back to the Lion from the North,
Hell
the
yeah.
thing that he did during the 30 Years War, like basically the reason that Sweden became a world power or a European power during this time was because he basically revamped the military, and where a lot of the people, like a lot of the European powers, had mostly melee fighting guys. Like they would have a bulk of pikemen or
Mm.
something, or like some kind of like spearmen type thing, and then they would have some, riflemen to just kind of use as like a support or something. He basically was like, no, let's flip that shit. Let's have a couple of pikemen and have nothing but musketmen. And then he would also keep, instead of looking around these giant cannons, he basically made smaller cannons. And so that way his army was more maneuverable and much quicker. So
Yeah.
because you had guys that had less equipment to carry around, and they were just carrying around muskets and their ammo, and then these smaller cannons, basically these guys would be like, oh, the Swedes are coming, and they'd be like, oh, they'll get here in like a month, and then they'd be there in like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and they'd be unprepared, and he would go in and just obliterate the shit out of them. And so basically, he led Sweden into the 30-Year War and just kicked everybody's ass. Like Germany, or I think he was actually with Germany. So it was like, but it was like Poland, Lithuania, Russia, and he fought with Russia. I'm getting my shit mixed up. But yeah, everyone he went up against, he was just kicking their ass, and he basically laid the groundwork for the Swedish Empire for what Karl would eventually get.
Yeah. And those snow countries, man, you like if it's a snow fight, you better retreat. They're so
Oh yeah.
fast. Like the way like you were saying, like how quickly they can get to you. Like it's
Hmm.
crazy. You'll be bogged down. They're there in 2 days. Like
Yeah, the first episode we had with Steve Tracy, we talked about a Finnish, and he fought during the Finnish war against Russia, like around the time of the World War II.
mhm.
And yeah, man, the stories of those people fighting in the snow, it's insane. They really the creepiest story that I love was when the Russian soldiers would come in, they would freeze to death because they just weren't supplied well, even though they're from snow places. You figured they'd be fine with winter. But no, they would go in and just forget coats because the Soviets were like, fuck you, just go anyway.
Yeah.
They went in and froze to death. And then the Finns, who were pissed off at the Soviets, would prop their frozen bodies up in the snow.
No shit.
Yeah, so there's pictures of the winter. If you look up Winter War frozen bodies, there's
Whoa.
bodies of Soviet soldiers just frozen in place, and they would prop them up like if they knew like a Soviet, like a way the Soviets were going, they would prop the bodies up there like almost like lampposts,
Yeah, like
and just be like, well, hey, that's your buddy. Say hi on your way down.
terrifying. I'm turning around. Hey, you know what, man? I'm turning
Yeah,
around.
yeah. I'll try the gulag.
Yeah,
I'll just try the gulag. It can't be worse than this.
yeah. Hard labor. Here we come.
So now let's talk about Carl himself. So the 30 Years' War happens. That gets over in like 16, I think something like 1660 or 1680.
Yep.
And just don't get me on. That's that's the one thing for people that study history or don't study history. Fuck time period. Like fuck dates. You don't have to fucking remember shit. That's what Google's for.
Yep.
I've always had conversations with people that are like, I don't like history because I could never get the dates right. Fuck, who gets the dates right?
Yeah, I know. I get it. Dude, I hated like the 100 level classes to be like, what year was this battle? Like, who gives a fuck? I'll tell you about the battle.
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what happened in the battle. As long as you don't get like 100-year difference, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
Like if you know America wasn't founded in 1676, then you know what? Pick up a book. But otherwise, you're fine.
Yeah,
Okay?
you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. You're right, dude. It turns people off, though. It does, especially like a cool topic like this where there's so much going on each year. So, like to be bogged down by that, like, forget it.
Yeah.
The big theme of it's what's the fun.
Yeah, just remember the cool shit. Don't worry about the numbers. Yeah. But yeah, so the 30 Years' War ends. Sweden is basically riding high because they had like the best military during that time. And then Carl the 12th, so his father, he was kind of almost like a Spartan-esque man where he believed in training. He was a military guy. He constantly trained his son in warfare. And then when he died, Carl takes the crown at like age 15.
It's crazy.
And that is such a young age. And where too he is special. Any time in history that somebody as young as 15 takes the reins, it's 90% horrible.
Yep. And
like they always fuck it up.
And same thing in his case. Oh, young leader, let's go fuck with Sweden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see what he's got.
And oh gosh, what was it called? There was this was one of my favorite things. So when he was, I think 16 or 17, so about a year or two into his reign, there was this thing called Gottorp. I'm going to butcher it because it's a Swedish term, Gottorp Fury, which was literally they crowned a term for when him and his cousin Frederick the seventh of some country that they were kind of in charge of would go around town acting like assholes. It's so funny. It was literally like a year, and every time these two hung out, it like even though he was king at this point, they would get onto horses and ride through Stockholm, and they'd take off people's wigs and hats. They'd hit their hats off. They would go into places and get drunk and then throw furniture out a window.
Oh, it's like being a mob boss's kid. Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want.
Well, and you know they would try to be like, maybe you shouldn't do that, my king. There's other things he could be doing, and he's just like, shots, chair,
Yeah.
and just chucks it out a window.
Throw him out the window.
Because you know he doesn't give a fuck.
No.
And it was funny because like they hung out in like one year. It was like 1698. They hang out, and then Frederick leaves. He goes back home, and they're like, okay, thank God. And Carl goes back to being a king and doing king things, and he's doing it. And then the next year, Frederick comes back. He goes right back to being an asshole and does the exact same shit.
There we go. Yep.
And I think the best part of the story is one night they got a bear drunk off of wine.
What?
They forced a bear to drink in the palace,
Holy
and then the bear falls out a 2-story window and dies.
Oh my God.
And that was when he decided to stop drinking strong liquor.
You could kill a bear.
He's like, oh, my poor bear friend has died. I'm never drinking wine again.
Can you imagine having that much fun? You're like, let's get a bear and get it drunk.
Right. First question, why is there a bear in the palace? Second question, how'd you get it to drink wine?
Oh, who was the poor sucker who had to get the bear for the king? The little brat king.
Get Gunter. We're taking shots.
Yeah, look at me a bear.
Oh yeah, no, and like, well, and what's funny too is that everything I read about too said that they forced him to drink wine. So I can imagine you being able to give wine to a bear, and maybe if it's sweet wine, he'll drink it. You know, like if you like a dog with a bowl, you put it in front of him, he's going to drink it. Yeah. But they forced him, so that means eventually the bear was like, "No, please, I've had enough," and they said, "No, you're going to have it." So then they held down a bear.
Oh, it's just swiping
and like forced wine into him.
No, like a prisoner of war. Oh my God.
But now the problem is now, you know, we have that 21st century mind. So I'm thinking of a bear doing a keg stand, which is like the best thing I can think of.
That's pretty good. I just pictured that myself. That's not bad. A nice like one of those little brown bears that you'd see on bicycles, little Russian dancing bears.
And there's like 16 people holding up the bear. They've like tied a rope to his feet, and they're up on a staircase just pulling him so they can keep him upside down.
Bear got so drunk it fell out of a window.
Yeah, and then he fell out a window, and that's when he was like, "I will go to meetings. I hope he's."
I surrender myself.
My drinking has literally killed a bear, so I need to calm down.
It's been 3 weeks since my last drink.
So, and I don't know, like I kept on all the stuff I was studying, I kept seeing that like other countries saw that he acted this way. I don't know how much that actually occurred, but like, can you imagine? Because this is also the same time too. This is the exact same time Peter the Great is in charge of Russia, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about like big names? Like he is, like Ivan the Terrible, who started Russia, is one of their big top dogs. Peter the Great, right below him, right? Yeah, like he's the guy that modernized Russia, turned it into a modern army, at least as modern as it was back then. And so he's one of the top dogs. And the fact that Peter the Great is going up against this guy is like crazy. It's a super fight. It's a super fight.
And he's a teenage kid.
Yeah, and exactly. And he's a teenage kid. And Peter the Great was he was like in his 20s around this time. So you had a dude who was in his 20s going up against a high schooler.
Yeah.
You know.
Just
too young. And if you had that fight today, right? Like let's say you took a comedian, let's say you know, because I'm sure we probably know a couple comedians that are still teenagers. Mm-hmm. You know, I've at least I know I've met a couple. You try to think of a comedian in their teen years, and then someone who's maybe in their 20s or something. Even then, I would look at that and be like, well, older guys probably got it.
Yeah.
Because as much as I'm sure, you know, the younger guy has some stuff, you know, it's experience and age. He's just going to have more on him. You know?
Yeah, and if the younger guy kicks, it might be 1 out of 10 times.
Exactly. You'd be like, he'll probably get him most of the time.
Yeah, not 3 years of just whooping ass. It's crazy.
But these countries look at the Swedish king, who's going around town knocking off people's hats and throwing bears out of windows. And they're like, you know what? I think we could probably punk this kid out. I think we could probably beat the shit out of him.
Let's go get some more territory, shall we?
So, and this was another really fascinating part of this story, was how many countries went to war with Sweden, right? Because obviously Russia is already big enough dog that you're like, that's already intimidating, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
was Denmark, Norway, Saxony, Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. And some of those countries were controlled by one guy. So you had three leaders that's going up against this guy. But that's like 5 countries. This is literally a world war.
Oh yeah.
But they're all ganging up on one guy.
Yep. And the guy who will get drunk with bears. That's not someone I want to mess with. Not at all. And it's interesting too, like once everything gets going, it's really seems like for Carolus Rex, like it's all about principle for him. I read one quote where it's like Rex wasn't at war with Poland and Russia. He was at war with Peter and Augustus, or whatever the guy's name was. Like,
yeah,
that's balls. Like, here we go.
Yeah, and he showed that too, because there were a couple of times where, like, I think it was in Poland, when he was in Poland, he went to war. He was sieging some city, and it was like an ancient city that had been around for thousands or hundreds and hundreds of years. And when he took it, instead of like burning it to the ground like some people would and say, hey, look what I did to this great city, he instead treated it really well and was like, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. And even like fed some of the defenders because he knew they were starving. Like, he was like nice to him enough to just be like, it's fine.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to do it. Because like you said, he wasn't at war with the people or the country. He was at war with the leader.
Yeah, I just came here
like
to back your leader. You guys are cool.
Yeah.
No beef with you guys. It's interesting too, for as wild as a guy he was, it seemed like they were really organized. Like, one thing I saw was the reason he was able to get successful quick was how organized he got the military, how they structured, kind of based off probably from 30 Years War. They still had that tight structuring of the military where that was conducive for their size. Because I mean, most of these battles, man, they're outgunned and outnumbered.
Yeah. And, well, the biggest comparison that he gets, a lot of people throughout history, is they compare him to Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
And when you study him, you realize you're like, that's a dead-on comparison, because he's young when he takes the reins. His father before him, or like the leaders before him, basically set him up with an already great empire, but he takes it and then just again he cranks it up. He evens it out.
Running.
Gustavus Adolphus changed the Swedish Empire to be more mobile, more heavily based on muskets and things. And then Karl the 12th takes that and he goes, well, let's do even more with it. He goes, let's keep it mobile. He did the exact same thing. He had mobile cannons. He kept things going fast. He kept the training. One of the reasons that the Swedish army was so well trained over the other countries is that the other countries like Russia still had a base, like a type of conscription, where they would go to a town that they rule over and say, all right, we need fighting men between the ages of like 17 to 25. And then they would just take and then put a gun in their arms and be like, okay, go now, you're in the army. And they would get a little bit of training and then they would go to the front lines, and that was it. Sweden had a military.
Yeah.
Like, they were one of the first countries that had a military that was like, you are going to be paid by me every month. You're going to be a military guy. And then, and they were loyal to him. They weren't loyal to anything else except for him. And that's another thing to talk about too, was that he was an absolute monarch, right? Like, he was the one in charge.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite stories about when he became king is, most of the time somebody in Europe would become a king, they would go in and then say, oh, does everyone promise to, or they'd put the crown on, and then they would say, oh, does everyone promise to be loyal to me? And then they would say, yeah, we're going to be loyal because you're our king. You just put the crown on. Before he put the crown on, he said, you will all swear loyalty to me. He's like, I'm not going to put the crown on until I know I have your loyalty. And if anyone said anything, he'd be like, that's fine. And then he'd kill him.
Yeah, you're out of here.
Like, he was like, if you're going to say something, then I'm going to go to you because you've now declared war on me, basically. I'm going to take you out. And if anyone has anything else to say, then you'll get the same comeuppance,
Yeah.
And then as soon as there was nobody in his court that had any problems, he said, now you can put the crown on me.
Yeah.
Like, he got loyalty first before he became king, because he knew he's like, you're going to listen to me and that's it.
And usually like that kind of like brash leadership, if you don't stick by your word, you're going to get a mutiny. They're
Yeah.
going to turn on you. The man he was a
Mhm.
man of principle or teenager of
Yeah.
principle, man. Uh,
Well, and he definitely understood that his youth, like, had, I mean, he had enemies immediately,
mhm.
because I mean, it's you would have a king's brother, it's the Lion King situation, where you would have the king's brother be like, "Oh, well, I'm older than you, shouldn't I take the reins?"
Yeah,
But he was smart enough to be like, "No, guess what? You're getting stomped on now." Boom, push Scar over the edge.
yeah. The first person he went to war with was his cousin in Norway. I mean, I'm sure that
Yeah.
was over the same. Like, now I'll just take it, little shithead. I'll take it. I'll just take Sweden.
And then you mentioned it before, but in the beginning of it, and I mean, basically through the whole thing, he's always been outnumbered. Basically, every battle, because all these countries at the exact same time in 1700, they all attack at once.
Yeah,
Russia starts to invade like his northern territories, and Poland, Lithuania attack his southern one, and then Denmark attacks there. He has people defending and shit, but they're all outnumbered, and they all beat him back.
yeah,
Like they all, like, every single battle, it's like I think his army was about 40,000 people and Russia had like 100,000, and every single time in the beginning of the war, and that's such an insane amount of people to have, like over. That's such a big over.
Oh, I know. And then like lack of casualties too. Like
Yeah.
one of those battles where they're outnumbered, they only had like 600 casualties.
Yeah.
Like
That
I
would be
think it goes
like if
back.
Kevin Hart dunked on basically.
It's crazy, man. Like I think it goes to that speed factor of like
Hmm.
well trained. Like I read one quote which I thought was really cool. Man, I get really excited about like just real badasses like this, where
Hmm.
he said he get to close to a battlefield and well, most generals leaders would ask, well, how many are there? Where are they? Where's everything lined up? He just go, where are they? And then
Hmm.
start darting. Like
Yeah.
didn't care about the details. Like, no, we're going to war right now. We're bringing them to war. I
Hmm.
don't care about where they're set up, where they're like flanks. We're just going to go right now. And
Hmm.
it's wild. It's crazy.
And just like any good, really fascinating general, and just like Alexander, he was also he wasn't one of those guys that sent armies out. He was there with them.
Yeah, dude.
I remember watching some kind of movie or TV show. I don't know if it was. I'm pretty sure it was like a BBC one, but it was like years old because it looked really old. Uh, but they had like a scene where he's like sitting in a room and he's doing like jumping jacks. He's doing like like exercises, and this like lady comes in and watches him and is like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm keeping my body fit," And he's like, "Just keep working out." And she's like so stunned by this. She's like, "But why?"
Yeah.
And he tells her, he's like, "Because a king has to be strong enough to lead his army." Like, he hated like fat sloth people. He would hate that we're talking about him right now.
Oh yeah. Oh my
He'd
God.
be
Yeah.
like, "You guys don't get to talk about me, fat
Yeah.
pieces of shit."
I know. God, I'm such a pussy. I would never be able to do this. I don't have the fortitude, man. And that front line stuff is what really got me thinking about Patton too. Like
Hmm.
and keep running. Like
Yeah.
Patton got in trouble for he was told by Eisenhower, "You let Britain take Rome," and he was like, "Nah, nah, nah, we're gonna just keep going. I
Yeah.
don't care to deal with consequences." Like I love that. And
Yeah.
frontline guy, brash, awesome, so cool.
And that was what, and that's exactly what he did. So Patton is a very good comparison there as well, because that's exactly what he did. And that seems to be like a big similarity between these guys, because Alexander did the exact same thing, Patton did the same thing, Carolus Rex did that. They all just, they would take something and then want even more.
Yeah, yeah, and do it themselves,
Hmm.
not do it from behind. Like
Exactly. There was a time during the beginning of the war where, like, he had just beaten Russia in a big big battle. Peter the Great sent him a letter like, "Hey man, how about this? I'll give back the stuff that I took, and you give me the area that he wanted to build St. Petersburg." Right? Because that was what Peter really wanted. He wanted St. Petersburg,
mhm,
which, what did St. Petersburg become? Anyway, but so he wanted to build St. Petersburg on that patch of water there, so that he could have a trade port. So he told him, he's like, "How about this? We'll end the war, and you give me St. Petersburg, and I'll give you back the other shit that I stole." So
mhm,
he had a time to make amends and make peace. And he was like, no.
Mm-mm.
He's like, you went to war with me, and we're going to finish it. And I just closed my book, and I had this thing. Voltaire, the famous philosopher, great thinker, whatever you want to call him, he was actually a big fan of Carl. And he quoted him, or there was a quote that was one time that Voltaire said, which was, I have resolved to never start an unjust war, but never to end a legitimate one except by defeating my enemies. So
Yeah,
you see it right there where Peter's like, listen, man, we can end this now. Just give me a little bit of stuff and then I'll get out of your hair. And he's like, no. You started this. We're going to finish it when I take you out.
I'm not dealing with you again in 5 years. No, yeah.
Exactly. He's like, we're not going to keep this going. All right, you started it. I'm going to finish it. Let's go.
And then he kept kicking ass too after that. He backed up. And then the one time they had to retreat out of Russia, right, is when he got hit and got put in a coma.
Yeah,
I think that's the only loss I saw.
Well, he had one big one. So because I think my favorite part of the war was when he took out Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Like he went down to Poland, and the guy in charge of that, I think it was Augustus, I think, or he basically kicked Augustus out of his kingship and planted as his own ruler, and then said, all right, now this is now under Swedish control. And it was like, God damn, this
he did
guy.
not like Poland. He did not like Augustus at all.
Oh. And Augustus was one of those guys that he's basically like the opposite, because he would like he was leading his army, but he didn't have any of the tactical mindset that Carolus Rex had. You know, Carl would run up, make fast movements, keep things mobile, keep things moving, take out armies, and the other guy would just like get bogged down and just stop, you know, and delay himself. And it was like, dude, you're literally, this is a tortoise versus like a hawk. It's like, you're going to lose.
Yeah. Dude, I just read here, too. August the 2nd of Poland, another one of his damn cousins, man.
Yeah.
Family, what are you going to do? Huh? What are you going to do?
I mean, they're all, they're all related. It's
oh, yeah. Then they all get into the British Empire, all a bunch of weirdos.
But yeah, so he goes into Russia. As is always the case, winter comes. If Russia takes anything from Game of Thrones, their national like phrase should be "winter is coming."
Yeah.
And if they take that, then like no one would ever invade them.
I don't understand why I guess maybe it's oil or in steel factories, but like why does everyone want to take it so bad all the time? Every war. Like, and it always ends up blowing up in there every time.
Every time. Well, and what's funny too is that they also like Russia will always lose, and then they have something happen, and it's always winter that just turns the tide for them. But also, too, it's always like the coldest winter ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like with Napoleon, he had the coldest war since forever. And then in this one, I read that they had the coldest winter in like 500 years.
Yeah.
So when Karl was just sweeping through Russia, they had a winter that was so freezing. It killed off like the freezing temperatures alone killed off like a third of his army.
Yeah.
And then because of that, Peter the Great was able to turn around with his like he got a much better army instead of the newbies he was using. And he turns back around, and the big battle that he loses is the Battle of Paltova. And the injury that he takes in that one is he got injured like a bullet went through his heel.
Oh shit!
Like it went through his ankle, and so he had to be carried on basically like a chair.
Damn.
And he actually still went into battle on that chair. Like he was still there.
Fuck yeah,
and so when his army was charging, he was literally on this chair. People were carrying him, and then all of a sudden bullets started raining on him, and it killed off all but two of the guys carrying his chair, who had to turn around and go back.
Oh my god.
Because he wasn't able to walk. He wasn't even able to ride a horse.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did I just picture him like Yosemite Sam just from a chair? Pow, pow, pow. Come on, you sons of bitches. Wherever cool that would sound in Swedish.
Ja, så mycket sticket du hittills. Pew, pew. You stepped into the wrong IKEA, motherfucker.
Put this together, bitch.
Oh, you missing a part? I know.
Mm.
I took that part away.
Here's some custom nuts and bolts, motherfuckers.
The one thing that I found to be almost like, or I guess the next part of this war really kind of showed the bad side that he had, which was he was terrible at political negotiations. Because when he gets beaten in Russia, he goes south to the Ottoman Empire, who were big enemies of Russia, and then he's trying to convince the Ottoman Empire to like go to war with Russia, and he can't because he's just basically an asshole.
Yeah, enough of you, man. I love that part. I love, and like it's pretty much him and his closest buds, right? His closest guys. They pretty much get their own little settlement outside of Constantinople. I just love the idea of like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swedes in the middle of the Ottoman Empire, just pissing off everyone. Like, shut up!
Yeah,
shut up! They put him in they put him on like house arrest too.
Oh yeah, because like there was like a moment when he was either talking to the Sultan himself, or it was like an emissary that was sent to him, and they were like, "Listen, you guys are causing too much of a ruckus. You guys are like, we're giving you too much money and you're not doing anything. You just want us to go to war. So we need you guys to maybe think about packing up and leaving." And he like draws a sword on the guy, and it's like, "I'll fucking cut your throat." And he's like, "All right, I'm out of here." And he goes back and tells him what happened, and then they like send an army to him, and they're like, "Are you guys gonna leave?" And they have like a little skirmish, and then he's like, "All right, fine, we'll leave."
Fine, I'll go. Take it
but
easy,
even then, he was one of those guys that was like, "Thank you for your hospitality. I'm sorry I got a bit much." He's one of the guys that walked out and was just like, "Fuck you, fuck all of you."
Fucking
he walked out of the Ottoman Empire just like double birds up, like, "Fuck you, fuck this."
That made me crack it up, just like 1,000 Swedes in the middle of a freaking Turkish market, like just annoying the shit out of everyone.
How many Thugen for this Thugen?
Yeah, the only white guy these people have ever seen go, "I'm a king. You will give me whatever." Like, you ain't a king here, bitch. Shut up. Then
See, and I'm just imagining them all sounding like Swedish Chef.
the
Muppets. They're all trying to like explain something, and they're just like,
"Man, I can't do a good Swedish accent. I don't even want to try it. I'm just gonna embarrass myself."
But don't worry, this isn't a good Swedish accent either.
No, it's better than mine.
Don't worry, this podcast isn't going to be big in Sweden.
I hope not. Might have to today.
That's fine. I've pissed off Russians and I've pissed off Swedish people, so it's fine.
Good. Hey man, if you're gonna go to war right. Yeah. One thing I learned today: take it to them, baby.
So then the next thing after he leaves the Ottoman Empire, because eventually he does, he hightails it back to Sweden and basically finds it in complete disarray, where the other countries have come back. Like the guy in charge of Poland, I think, has gotten back at least most of his power. Russia's coming in. Denmark's coming in. Even Britain. Funny enough, I found out too. Even Britain came in and it was like, well, you know what? Since we're all land grabbing, I'll just take a couple things here.
Homeboy's hiding out in Turkey. Let's go.
He's on the other fucking side of Europe. What the fuck is he gonna do? And then he gets there like 2 weeks soon. Like, oh shit! Like they are fast.
Yeah, it's great. Another thing that's cool too. I read is that of all these battles, 30-year war, stuff before, they said this is the first at this point now. Him coming back, first time Sweden's ever found itself in a defensive hold. It's always been on the offensive, which it's so cool to think about because you never think of Sweden like contemporarily as an agitator for any war.
Exactly. I mean, when it's just like for many years, I was the same way with Canada. I always thought Canada was, they're the guys that don't fight wars and nothing. And then, of course, that's just a stereotype or whatever, a misunderstanding. People don't know. Yeah. And then you can find them out and find Canadian units in World War II, World War One. They were sent all over the place. They'd fought in other wars. They fought in Vietnam. They've been sent to places, because basically they kind of were allied with people. So they'd be like, okay, well, we'll send people to go wherever you guys go.
Yeah.
It's just that because they're not because they didn't create an A-bomb. They
Yeah,
just don't get the credit for stuff that they did. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of them big time. I mean, especially because they're allies with us naturally, and then also you got the British half, and you got the French parts. Like
yeah.
anytime, even before World War One, any British conflict, they got called up just as
Hmm.
much. Going from Alberta to India,
Yeah.
it's gotta be fun. Nice fun boat ride. Ugh.
And
Yeah, it's
so I think, because I'm trying to remember, I can't remember what the exact battle was that he died, but he was fighting. I think he was on the side where they were fighting Denmark.
yeah,
I think it was, and he was visiting the trenches, right? He was
yeah.
like visiting the guys digging the trenches, and from what I read, the story was that the generals with him were all ducking, and he was just standing there, and he was a pretty tall dude, obviously young, but he was still tall. And they said, "Sir, maybe you should like keep your head down." He's like, "No, I'm fine." And he's going through looking at stuff, and then he looks up on the ramparts. He basically just kind of steps up and looks over, and a bullet hits him right
Yep.
in the head.
Yeah.
And there are conflicting stories. It's one of those things which just kind of depends on like who you read, or who the study is. Basically, they it's either a sniper that was from one side, but he was like from Denmark, but he was basically behind enemy lines,
Hmm.
or it was one of his own soldiers who just was firing a gun and didn't see that his head was in the way,
Yep.
because the way that it fired basically, it went in from his side and out towards the enemy.
Yep.
They're like, either he was shot by his own side, or there was a sniper that hit him from behind enemy lines. So
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like it's why I kept going back to Pat. Another Patton, same thing. His death was kind of, and no one's really sure if it was a assassination or an
mhm,
accident. Like
yeah,
it's crazy, crazy
yeah.
correlations.
And Alexander the Great had the same thing too, because
Yeah,
some people say he was poisoned, some people said he just got sick,
damn man, that's
something like
crazy.
that. So yeah, it's and of course, and just like too with those guys, anticlimactic.
Yeah,
I mean, this was a guy that could have easily could have ruled, Europe. He's definitely like, and one of the biggest things that historians talk about with him is he's a big what if. You
yeah,
know, if he was able to defeat Russia during the Great Northern War, then Russia wouldn't be the power they were. He
yeah,
either could have taken them completely, or he would have basically pushed them back past Moscow, and then Russia would basically just be a country like Mongolia, like above China and in Siberia.
yeah.
You
Uh,
know,
there'd be
like
no
it
Bolshevik
just
revolution. Yeah, the whole
exactly,
world
yeah.
would change, man. Like,
And then the Poland, Lithuania would have been under Swedish rule, so they would have had all of Sweden. They probably could have taken Denmark at that point. Like they could have easily have just taken off that entire part of Northern Europe.
yeah,
But because it changes drastically, Sweden changes drastically, because then the rule goes to his sister, because he never had kids. In fact,
mhm,
there are some stories that say he never fucked.
yeah. Like
And that, I think, is the biggest lesson to take away from him, is if you get bitches out your life, you can do anything.
yeah, yep,
If you
yep,
don't fuck with women, you can be like a great warrior.
yep.
Like I know for a fact, if he had fucked one time, he would have just been a fat piece of shit ruling Sweden.
Yep. Oh, dude, I love it too. They try to say like, "Oh, he was devoutly religious,
Yeah,
so he wouldn't have sex without marriage." Like, no, he went to war with everyone. I mean, what's easy on the devoutly thing?
yeah,
He was just a psycho and just loved war more than anything. He
yeah.
didn't want to be distracted.
Exactly. And when it's like he was basically, I mean, he basically thought himself a god, or like the closest thing to it. Like he
Yeah.
believed in God, but he was also like, I'm like the damn closest thing to it. I'm literally sent by God to rule this nation.
Yep.
So like, yeah, like he was very religious. However, at the same time, I think he was so focused on becoming a great historically known military leader that he just didn't care
Yeah.
about anything else. He was just like, "Listen, I'm down to just beat the shit out of Russians
Hmm.
and take over the fucking world."
Anyone. Yeah, and I love it too. Like, it's a principle of respect too. Like, kind of like a mob boss. Like, we had a deal, man.
Yeah.
What are you doing to me? Like, what are these peace treaties for? Now I got to come bitch slap you. Like, and we're not renegotiating. We have a deal, sir. Like,
Like
it's
what's the I'm trying to think of the Darth Vader quote, but saying in Swedish, like, these aren't the negotiations we agreed on. Pray I don't alter them further.
Won't you know you had some information? It's crazy, yeah, man. Like I read something too, like with his death, like how many future autopsies, like historic, like I guess local historians, like obsessed with how he
Mhm.
died, like and obsessed with the fact that he didn't have any kids or nothing. I think I saw something they thought he might have been a hermaphrodite, and they dug him up again.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
nah,
yeah.
got a big old giant warrior cock. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like,
Well, and then they thought maybe he was gay, and that was why he didn't have any children. But that was just because like they literally had one letter that was like sent to a dude that was like a friend of his, and he just said, "I love you." But
yeah,
a lot of people just say, "Well, it just was probably platonic."
yeah,
Those people talked really romantically back then,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, you go to war with someone, man. I'm assuming that's some love, man.
Yeah. I would say though that that would be another one of those great like I don't know, one of those great, like, I guess, ironic things of just having this guy who was a young leader, an Alexander Great in the modern age, fucking coming in, kicking ass, taking names, and then they find out that, like, yeah, he was gay.
Yeah,
He was closet gay, and then
yeah,
you have all these concepts of, oh, he's a fucking manly, dude, fucking come in, bust you in the head, drink beer with a bear, and then fuck you, and then be like, and also too, he liked doilies and men.
oh yeah.
Like, wow, it's like, oh, that's blowing my concept.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's the scariest kind.
The scariest kind of gay man, which can
Yeah,
take over many northern countries.
it's gay for bloodlust and battlefields, dude. I'm so glad you picked this topic, dude. It's remarkable, like how much we don't know, like how cool this story is. Like,
Yeah,
it's how I want to like.
yeah.
I wish there was. Wish I could read Swede. Whatever. What is that? How do you say that? What was there?
I guess Swedish is their language. I
Yeah,
think it is. I don't know if they had another name who read Swede.
yeah. Well, I even saw Voltaire wrote a whole history on him.
Yeah,
Wonder if it'd be interesting to see a English translation of
yeah,
his book. I'm sure there is somewhere. But
yeah. Well, and there's a couple of books that I've been able to find. I wasn't able to read them, um, and like they're in English, but there's definitely stuff on him. He is definitely one of those guys that I think could easily have a movie or something made about him, but it would be so difficult to promote the movie in a way that Americans would care. Because again, I mean, who cares about Sweden? Who cares about some Swedish guy? The history is already so complex to try to explain all of what happens in the time frame of the 30 Years War to him. You
yeah,
know, to condense that into a 2-hour movie, I think for Americans it would be difficult for them to give a shit. But
yeah,
that's always the problem with like history movies is
yeah.
condensing all that stuff down.
And then making a timepiece like the wardrobe is not appealing to even look at. Like,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
but the name Carlos Rex is so cool. Like,
Hmm.
there's something you could ever you could push the hell out of that.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I mean, even if Sweden made a movie, even if like Sweden made a big ass movie and it was just for them, I'd be like, dude, I'll buy it and watch the subtitles, man.
Oh yeah, for
Like,
sure.
fucking do it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I want to know more about it, man. Because
Yeah.
how do you go to war multiple times, 3-1, and come out not only on top but like
But like barely even
unscathed?
scathed,
Yeah,
you
like
know? One of the battles that he had with Poland, the Poland king had sent his best troops, like his veteran troops. However, he was also backed up with Russian auxiliaries, and the Russian auxiliaries were fresh troops because this was early in the war, and the Russian troops had taken their uniforms, which were like green, and they flipped them inside out to try to throw the enemy off to
mhm.
know like who was Polish and who was Russian. But Carolus Rex saw it, and so instead of attacking the highly trained Polish troops, he sent all of his armies to go into the lines of the Russian troops, which he kicked their ass. They
Mhm.
all ran away. And then when they all ran away, he then focused on the Polish troops and it was like, guess what? Now you don't have your backup.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah.
was so fucking smart.
Outflanked the shit out of them. Yeah,
Uh,
good
one of
battle
and
ball scenario.
another big thing that affected me into studying this too is I am a big fan of the Total War video games.
Oh yeah,
And
that's cool.
the Total War games, for anyone that doesn't know, they're real-time strategy games, and a lot of them are historically based. Most of them are historically based. They only recently started going out into like Warhammer or whatever.
Okay.
But one of them is the first one that I bought was called Total War Empires. My cat's messing with shit.
Hmm.
Total War Empires, and it's set in the 1700 period. And you basically pick a country, and then you raise an army, you run your country, and then you try to take over the other countries.
Yeah.
And I kept playing as other people and having a hard time with the game. Like I played as Russia, and basically the only way I could win with Russia was if I used the Russian method, which was just have the bigger army.
Yeah.
Like all I had to do was spend all of my money on all of my guys and then attack whatever army I could and just hope that I had more men than they did.
Yeah.
Then after finding out about Carolus Rex, doing a little bit of studying with him, I restarted the game. I took Sweden. Dude, I took over the fucking world. I took over. They were so fucking OP. They're so powerful in that game. I took over Sweden, Denmark, Norway. I took over all of Russia. I took over all of Poland, Lithuania. I went all the way to France, took over Spain, Northern Africa, went down to the Ottoman Empire. And then I sent some ships over with guys to like India and took over India. I was like, dude, Sweden, everyone's speaking fucking Sweden.
It's crazy.
Everyone's eating meatballs.
That's so cool though, these games where you actually apply historical strategy the better you do. That's cool. It's so wild.
And the more you upgrade your stuff, like the better stuff you get. So at the beginning of it, when you do have like cannons, you have cannons that don't even move.
Wow.
Right? You just have cannons, so you have to put them down and then just hope that wherever they are, the enemy will come in. But obviously the AI is set to like stay out of the range of them or go to a place that you can. And then when you get them, when you upgrade them, you can get cannons that you can move. And just like with what he did, when you upgrade them further, you basically get ones that are just more mobile and quicker to move. And when you have that, oh, it's game over.
Now you're just racing.
I'm like, dude, like I'll just have like 5 cannon guys out of like 20 guys you can have. I'll have like 5 cannon guys, and they just fucking obliterate anything. Like if I'm taking over a city, I just obliterate it, and I'm like, you're fucking gone.
Yeah, dude. Boom. If Rex had those, he wouldn't have gotten shot. He kept getting held up at some castle until he didn't have big enough cannons.
Yeah.
Yeah, some guy whacked him probably. That's a shame.
Yeah.
What a badass.
But yeah, Sweden, you live deep in our hearts.
Yeah. Crazy because they just went from a monarchy to a parliament and no problems ever since.
Yeah. Well, and the other really fascinating thing about the transition, because he was the end of the Swedish Empire, but also just the Sweden of like, powerful military rule. However, he was also an enlightened person.
Yeah,
because this was during the, I mean, you have Voltaire, you have all these other great philosophers in this new age
so many,
thinking of basically this is the thinking that is transitioning from the medieval to the modern age. And he was one of those guys. So even though he was a militaristic, let's go fight kind of guy, he was also into thinking in a more complex way that was coming about. And so when he died and the next people took power, they basically was just like, all right, we've done our military stuff, so let's just create a new type of parliament and have elected leaders, and let's just focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
And let's just do some other things.
That adds to his leadership, like someone who's that much of a thinker and that great of a motivator and leader. Anybody go to war with him, you follow him to death, like. It's really interesting. Like, it's really cool. Voltaire really spent a lot of time on him too. So that'd be interesting to dive into. That's really
for sure. Yeah, because I took a class that was I took a philosophy course, but also like a history of science.
Yeah,
which was very fascinating class. And so I learned a lot about philosophers and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the big ones come out of that time frame.
Oh yeah.
So I would definitely be down to read some Voltaire. And then stuff like this too is always fun for being a historian, because when they do get mentioned, you like notify it like immediately.
Oh yeah,
and I love that shit. I love reading something and then being like, oh, the 30 Years War happened and the Swedish guy took over. You're like, I know that guy. I know what they're talking about.
Yeah, you go down a rabbit hole again. Like, oh crap, hold on, I gotta go back to that. Go back to that. And then you find so much more cool shit. Like,
oh yeah,
I found one book.
Oh,
I'm sorry, keep going.
Oh, I was gonna say, because when we had Jeff King on, that was what this podcast was. It was Tangent City.
Yeah,
like we would just go down a rabbit hole, because that's unfortunately that for me with history, that's my crutch, man. If I find one thing, I will jump into that hole and read anything I can. I'm like a maniac that's never read a book before, learning how to read for the first time. I'm like, give me everything.
Oh, me too. Like I hit it kind of like I felt like I was back in college doing research again. Like when you like something, it's fun. You know, that's why I was able to get through college. Otherwise, I never would have graduated ever. Like, school was not for me. But once I got into history, I loved it.
I want to tell my funniest history class joke, or not history class moment that I had. It was the best prank I've ever pulled in my life. I was in high school, and I think I was a junior. I was in a U.S. history class, and the teacher is like, so the first thing we're going to study is going to be the French and Indian War. And she's like, before we go over the subject, I want everyone to take out a piece of paper and write down what they know about the French and Indian War. So that way, when we go through it, we can go back and we can see what you learned versus what you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already known most of it, so I'm going down and I'm writing stuff. And this girl sitting next to me leans over and she goes, hey, what, can you tell me some stuff about this? And I go, sure. And so she gets her pencil ready and she starts writing down everything I say. And I'm like, so the war was fought between the French, their Native American allies, the British, and the Russians. And she looks to me, she goes, Russians? And I go, yeah, the Russians. She goes, how'd the Russians get there? And I was like, well, they went in through Alaska and then through Canada. And I was like, they were trading with the Native Americans for vodka because the Native Americans love to drink.
Good for
and
you.
Then it was, looking back on it, it's terrible, but again, I was in high school.
You gotta have fun. You're gonna be lazy.
And I'm like, so the Russians were fighting along with the Native Americans and the French against the British and their allies, and they beat them, and then they kicked the Russians back through Alaska into Russia, and then they beat up the French and Indians. And so the teacher goes, okay, everyone put down your pencils. She goes, okay, who wants to go first? Who raises their hand? Ever so confidently, like, boom, me, pick me, I know everything. And she goes, okay, you go. And the girl stands up and she goes, the French and Indian War was fought between America, the British, the French Indians, the Indians, and the Russians. And the teacher immediately does a double take and is like, excuse me?
Oh my God, dude, that's so funny.
And she's like the Russians traded vodka to the Native Americans. Oh. And the teacher's like, you have this all wrong. And I just start crying myself. I was bawling. It was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I can't believe she got so far as to say that they traded vodka.
Oh my God, dude. The poor girl, she was dealing with a comic in sheep's clothing.
Oh yeah, she turned to me and said, damn it, Steven.
I love those. There's nothing better than those moments where you really can get someone. Harmless getting of people is some of my favorite.
Oh God. She didn't talk to me for the rest of being in high school. She never said a word to me.
That's so fun. It's so worth it though.
All right, Johnny O, I think it's time we end it. We've been talking for, I think, an hour, and so I think we'll end it here. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you guys for having me, man. Thank you, actually. You're the best, dude. Miss seeing you every Sunday. Hope you get back on track again soon, man. We'll have...
Yeah, Johnny O, what's the name of your podcast again? It's
the Chilling Fields podcast with
That's right.
myself and Jeff King.
That's right. And where can people find that podcast?
Spotify, Apple, pretty much everywhere.
Awesome.
Not YouTube.
All right, listeners, if you guys are interested in listening to two funny dudes, two of the funniest dudes, Jeff King being one of the funniest, and well, obviously Johnny O the second funniest, then you guys can go check out The Chilling Fields on Spotify and Apple Store. Thank us again for coming on. We had a wonderful talk about a wonderful subject. Remember, this is not your daddy's history.
That's right, baby. Thanks, fellers.
Yeah, thanks, man.